Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this second episode in series two of Not If But When, the podcast that talks about all things funeral. And I'm Lindsay Conquest. I'm an independent celebrant and I'm based in Bedfordshire.
And I'm Kirsty Atherton. I too am an independent celebrant and I work in the northwest of England. So today we're going to talk about inclusivity, which is what we should have talked about last week, but we got a little bit excited with ourselves and had
We
to do
did.
something else. And we've had some technical difficulties with recording this one. So it's been interesting. It's been a journey. So today we're going to talk about inclusivity at funerals. What we need to do to ensure that funerals are inclusive and how we go about doing that, really. I feel like this is a bit of a specialist subject for you, Linz. I think that you are more knowledgeable than me on this. And yeah, I'm interested in your perspective.
Okay. I think, yeah, so maybe in some areas I am, but I suppose inclusivity covers lots of areas that maybe some still I think I'm always learning with these, with
Yeah.
making sure that we are inclusive in the language that we use and in the way that we, as celebrants, we officiate our services and how we talk to people when we're meeting with them. And I know that there are times, even when I've done videos on social media in the past where I'm talking about inclusivity, that I may not use the same language that other people would feel is okay, especially when I'm talking about sort of neurodiversity, autism, which is where
Yeah.
my sort of, I suppose I don't really want to say that I'm a specialist in it, but I have a daughter who
Oh,
has an
you are. Yeah,
autism
which makes you the
diagnosis.
specialist, doesn't it? Because it's your everyday, it's what you live with every day, isn't
Yeah.
it?
But I suppose along those lines, I would say that I'm a specialist in her and her needs. And I think
Yeah.
that's where this becomes quite important, that when we're talking about inclusivity, obviously we're covering everything from, making sure that everyone, no matter what race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability, or religion they are, that they feel included and valued.
Yeah.
Um, but in with that, it includes those with learning disabilities, so those on the autistic spectrum. And I think an important thing for me to raise in this podcast is that there is no specific guidance or training that you can receive, really, to know that you can 100% cater for everybody who is on the autistic spectrum without actually talking to them or their loved one, family member,
Yes.
because obviously they may not be able to communicate their needs
Yeah.
with you. But
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
person is different. So
Yeah.
I could tell you how I would adapt a service for my daughter,
Hmm.
but it won't be the same for how the next person that comes along who has autism will need you
Yeah.
to adapt that service. And,
Yeah. So then,
you know,
sorry, what,
so
what we're saying then is that just like the funeral needs to be adapted to suit the needs of the person that we're honoring, celebrating, mourning in that moment, so too do the people who are in attendance need to be considered in that way.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what's really important. And I know we can't talk to everybody that's going to attend a service and
No.
find out whether they've got a hearing impairment, whether they've got sight impairments, whether they've got a physical disability that we can help cater with, whether
Yeah.
they do have autism or another learning disability that means that they need some adaptations made. But I think there are things that we can do by talking to the family. That's something I do, which I'm presuming you
Yeah.
do as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Asking them if they know of anybody in the immediate family or friendship group who are attending that will have needs that we can maybe look at trying to adjust the service to cater for them. And I think for me, an important thing that I was going to mention, that if there are other celebrants or funeral directors listening to this, is that sometimes it's about just introducing things in a different way. So if a family member has asked you, or the family has asked you to play a certain song really loud because it was that person's favorite song and they want it played at high volume, there is nothing wrong with you standing there and saying, right, we're now going to listen to this piece of music. And just to let you know that this piece of music is going to be played at quite a loud volume because and if for
Yeah.
any reason you will find that difficult, please do feel free to either move further back in the chapel or to actually stand, you know, in the doorway and come back in when you feel comfortable to do that. And
Lovely.
that is
Yeah.
being inclusive. That is, and
Yeah.
it's a simple thing that no one's going to judge that you've said it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's, you know, and if anybody does, then that's not your problem. Your job is to be inclusive and to actually challenge anyone that's not comfortable with being inclusive. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think things
Absolutely
like
right.
that, just introducing things a certain way. Other things I do. Have you ever shown anyone round the chapel, Kirsty, that is sort of that has concerns, or whether they might have a learning disability or any other sort of needs that perhaps looking around the chapel would help them?
Well, it's something that I have offered to a couple, just a handful of people. Certainly when there is a child who's going to be at the funeral and it's an extremely close relative, it's a parent.
Yeah,
I've offered it then. Very often, what I've found is that in that situation, they've said no, thank you, but they've kind of, given me
yeah,
the impression that what they're actually meaning is, I think that's me putting you out. And what we've done then is sat there and I've literally described what it's like and drawn a little picture, that this is where the main door is, and then we wait here for this bit, and then we'll do this. And so I've certainly done that, but I absolutely would be open to, supporting
yeah,
people in that way. Yeah.
yeah,
And also, I think sort of the crems that we tend to work at, I know certainly the ones that I work at, if somebody appeared one day between services and said, we've just come for a recce because it'll really help us on the day, they would be welcomed with open arms. I'm
yeah.
sure they would.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, one thing I'm really keen on trying to get organised, which I meant to do about 2 years ago, but didn't happen because being a celebrant is quite busy sometimes. But
Sometimes.
I would love to have a walkthrough of all of the crematoriums in the whole of the UK, but definitely starting with my local area, where, you know, a video is done of a walkthrough, a sort of video tour really of as you arrive,
Yeah.
you know, where you go, what the chapel looks like, where you go afterwards, where the celebrant will stand,
Yeah.
that, you know, people can look at online. And I think
Yeah.
that will help everybody, even those with a physical disability. I think some people forget that those with a physical disability actually get really anxious about going somewhere new.
Of
They,
course. Yeah.
you know, they want to know
Yeah.
where the toilets are. Will they be able to access them? Will they be able to sit somewhere and actually see the ceremony, or will they be stuck at the side or at the back
Yeah.
where their
Yeah.
wheelchair will go?
Yeah.
So I think just helping with those things makes,
Mm.
you know, a huge difference. And
Yeah. The foundation of it is being open to that, isn't it?
yeah,
Of not assuming, just
yeah,
not assuming anything, and when somebody raises something, being open to work with them to try and find the right solution for them.
yeah,
It's that, isn't it? I absolutely love your idea of walkthrough videos. I actually think it would be an amazing thing to do in terms of being able to then, because I don't know if this has happened to you, but a couple of times I've had people who are going to their very first funeral.
mm,
It's been their grandparents generally who have died, and they might be in their early 30s, and they might feel awkward about saying to me, oh, I feel a bit nervous about this bit. I mean, I always ask, is there anything that I can help you with? Is there anything that, it would help to know?
yeah,
And I wonder sometimes if people are a little bit embarrassed to say, yes, please.
yeah,
And if I could just say, actually, there's this video, if you just go on it, and then it was somebody knowledgeable who was able to say, and so this is where we stand, and we stand here for this time, and because this is what we're doing, and then we do this, and almost sort of demystifying the things that we do. Why do we stand there as the hearse
yeah,
arrives and bow our heads? Why do we do that? Why does a funeral director get out of a hearse and page in front? I'm going off on one little bit off the subject, I know, but I mean, that's inclusive, isn't it? Because
yeah, definitely.
our our industry is a mystery to people, isn't
It
it?
is.
It seems, And that's one of the things that you and I want to do. We want to rip this black cloak off the head of this industry and say,
Yeah.
actually, we're just people doing an important job, and come along with us,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, it's any, I mean, the language that we use can, like you say, there are some terms that people aren't familiar with and the way the funeral works. So yes, sort of opening up that conversation and talking to people about what to expect. The catafalque is always one that we might use that word and people just sort of look and they don't like to ask you what we mean by that. So
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
catafalque is where they place the coffin at the front of the chapel. Um,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
think just language as a whole, I think, our role is to adapt the language we use in our ceremonies to
Absolutely.
make sure that we are inclusive of those people
Mhm.
that are going to be attending, or at least the people we know will be attending. Like I said,
Yes.
it's hard to do for everybody, but
Yeah.
that sort of includes those that maybe English isn't their first language.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I've worked with a few families where that's the case. That
Yeah.
even the
Me too.
next of kin, their English wasn't their first language, and you have to adapt your service, and you may feel as if you're not doing as professional a job with your script writing, but actually what you're doing is you're making that script in a way that everybody will understand you. You're not using fancy words,
Yeah.
you can still deliver it in this really special soft way that you always do, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a real wonderful challenge for a celebrant, for celebrants like us who relish the writing,
yeah,
who the writing is as important as the standing and saying, if not more important, actually. That would be another conversation for another day. But I think there are times when we meet a family where you think, oh, I can let rip with the creative writing here because they're going to
yeah,
come with me, they're going to get it, that's going to be what absolutely suits them. And it's being professional to
yeah,
know when to not do that as
yeah,
well, as much as actually in our hearts that's what we want to do. The predominant thing in our hearts is that we want people to get from the service what they need to get from it.
yeah,
And sometimes that is for us to rein ourselves back in. And I actually really like it when that happens, because I think it's a really good grounding lesson for us.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, even I suppose I've had services where maybe I know that the family would want it written a certain way and maybe more creatively written, but then I know that there are going to be a couple of people attending
Mm.
who do have a learning disability. A sort of, I'm thinking of a particular funeral. So what I tried to do there is that I made sure that the stories shared about their particular relationship were written in a way that they would understand and appreciate, and that
Yeah,
also the farewell wording for sort of the committal and those closing words were written in a way that also that they would really sort of impact everybody and everybody would understand the message that I was trying to get across. So
yeah,
it's just, yeah, that's just what we do, isn't it? That's part of
yeah,
our job. That's where we come into it. So
yeah.
um but
And a real
yes,
part of the joy of the job, actually, as well, isn't it?
yeah,
Because it is all about communication and healing, isn't it?
yeah,
Really, at the end of the day,
yeah.
and we're not doing our jobs if we're not actively trying to take as many people along with us in that process,
No, that's it.
within reason. Because, as
Yeah.
you say, we don't know who's going to be there on the day, do we? Often families don't know who's going to be there on the day.
No,
They need to
that's
talk about
it.
normalizing RSVPing for
Yeah,
funerals, because doesn't it cause people stress?
yeah, it
People get really
does.
upset about it, and the thought of them, like, running out of sandwiches afterwards and not knowing who's going to be there. And yeah,
Yeah,
so if you know that there's a funeral, anybody listening to this, if you know that's a funeral and you're going to go to it, just drop that family a message and say, yes, I will definitely be there, or I will be there at the chapel, but I won't be there afterwards at the whatever.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Just
good
do that.
idea. An
Yeah.
RSVP system would be good, wouldn't it? But I don't. But yeah, just people letting them know to take that worry away, and also I think as well, like I saw something online. I think it was another celebrant. And they'd said how it's now really normal to ask people and to tell people whether you've got something like a dietary requirement, so whether you've got an allergy, whether you're
Yeah,
vegetarian or vegan or gluten
yeah,
free. And I think we need to normalize the asking or letting people know if you've got, a need of any type, whether it's hearing
yeah,
impairment, visual impairment, physical disability, a learning disability. There's things that can be done
yeah,
that, that can help, and they're simple
yeah.
changes in some cases. So I think we need to normalize that as well, but it's okay
Mm,
to ask and to let people know when you're going to
yeah,
an event or a ceremony or whatever. um
yeah.
Another thing I was thinking about as well, Kirsty, is sort of religious and cultural differences and how they
Mm.
sort of influence perhaps our services, because obviously as independent celebrants, civil celebrants, we incorporate faith elements into our services, and are sometimes asked to do multi-faith services,
If families want us to.
if families want us to, yeah. And also, obviously, at a lot of funerals, we will have people attending from different faiths, different
Yes.
cultures, and
Yeah.
they may not understand. They may not have been to a funeral. They might not have been to a
Yeah.
funeral in this country. They might not have been to a civil or a celebrant-led funeral.
Hmm.
They might
Yeah.
not know what to expect. So I think it's also, you know, maybe incorporating elements in our services that just explain the process of what to expect, how
Yes.
this service is going to be formed and what's going
Yeah.
to happen, and just sort of maybe talk people through it a little bit more.
Mm. Yeah.
So I had a Polish family who hadn't lived in the UK for long enough to have attended a funeral here, and they just didn't
Mm.
know what to expect at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of their family were coming, so I just worded into the service, this is how it's going to work, this is what
Yeah.
to expect. We're going to have this, I'm going to talk about his life, and then we're going to have this, and and I think that just helps, and that's being inclusive as well, isn't it?
It is, and yeah, because really what inclusivity is putting aside your assumptions
Yeah.
that the way that you're about to do something or the place that you're about to do something in, just because it's comfortable for you, don't assume that it's comfortable for everybody. It's
Yeah.
just stepping outside of yourself, isn't it, actually, and just seeing it from the other point of view.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly, today, one of the funerals I have, there will be a British Sign Language interpreter, and it will
Oh,
be the first time that I have worked with one.
oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, and it's yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that. And when I was told by the family that there would be a BSL interpreter there, I asked whether that person was there for a specific person. And they said no, they just feel it's right to have
That
a
is
British Sign
amazing.
Language interpreter. Yeah, yeah. Now the daughter, one of the daughters of the lady whose funeral it is, that is her role, that is her job, that's what she does. It's obviously not her who's doing the interpretation, it's somebody she works with. But I loved that because I just thought, yeah, of course. Like you don't know who's going to need that. So
Yeah.
like, why, let's just do it all the time. I used to think about this during the pandemic because when we had all those like terrifying, talks from Downing Street or whatever, I found it really, really interesting that certainly the one from the Scottish Parliament, and I think the one from the Welsh Parliament too, always had a sign language interpreter next to them, and that the one that came from the British Parliament in England never did. And I just thought, no, that's not okay.
Mm.
That's not
I
okay.
think I think something makes me think that they did eventually, after realizing that they should have, which is just awful, isn't it? But
The
yeah,
numerous complaints from the public.
yeah. No.
You might well be right. I just remember
Mm,
thinking, why is, because
yeah,
this idea of like, like when people sort of associate thinking about other people's feelings as being something that's like incredibly woke and
yeah.
you're virtue signaling. Like my thought is always like, what skin off your nose is that? Do
Mm,
you know what I mean? If like there's going to be, I don't know, an 18th century novel taught in a university and it's going to have a trigger warning at the beginning of it because there is a feature of ideation of suicide in it, for example.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't need that trigger warning, just ignore it. Why does it matter to you? Do you know what I mean?
And probably feel fortunate that you don't need it.
Yeah,
In my
yeah.
opinion.
And take a moment to think, oh God, yeah. And then, I didn't think about the people who will be affected by that,
Yeah.
check your privilege for a minute. It's like,
Yeah.
why would you care? It's not getting in your way. It's,
No.
and if it's having that, I suppose, openness of heart, isn't it, to want other people to be able to experience what you experience. And I'm not saying that in a way that, I do that. I try to do that, but I'm sure I don't, because we're all living in our own privilege, and we all forget, don't we? How
Yeah.
fortunate we are,
Yeah.
or how different we are, or
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
the
And
world to right.
on the sign language side of it, actually, I'm going to add in that it's to be inclusive, to have the sign language interpreter there is brilliant. But then I think you've got to go that step further, because I've had a bad experience, Kirsty, that I'm going to let you know about. A family that had a big group of friends of the person that had died, who was part of the deaf community. So lots of their friends came who were deaf, had been deaf from birth, or had lost their hearing through their life. So they arranged for a sign language interpreter, paid for the sign language interpreter, and I sent them the script so that they had it and they knew that what was going to be said. And the family had decided that they didn't want the sign language interpreter to sign any of the songs or the hymn, which blew me away, because I was thinking, why wouldn't you, when you've paid for a sign language interpreter? So that straight away excluding the deaf community from that side. But I was okay with that, and it was the family's choice, of course. But what was most worrying, I think, is that the funeral director, it's not one that I work with regularly, actually, and the family themselves and the staff didn't consider where that sign language interpreter needed to be stood, and how important it was for the members of the deaf community to be sat together so that they could see the sign language interpreter. And there was so much importance put on where the family had to sit. And it was a big family, that they took up the whole one side of the chapel, which was the only place that the sign language interpreter was able to stand. So actually half of the people that were attending, that were hearing impaired, didn't have any hearing at all, couldn't see them.
Oh,
So I think it's just reinforcing that if you're, to be inclusive, it's not just enough to do that sort of one thing. You need to make sure that it all follows through in what you're offering, and that it's it doesn't fall flat, and that the people actually, it's sort of quite a, I don't know whether to say half-hearted attempt, because that's unfair, because they really did do their utmost. I don't think the communication between all of them, and probably myself as well, should have been more
should have
inclusive
been
there,
better.
to make sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that is really important, isn't it? That you're not just doing something because it's a box ticking exercise. You're
Yeah.
not just saying, well, we had an interpreter there. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Because it is thinking that through. And that's where involving the people who are experiencing that situation, involving them, they're the ones who need to make the decision. Where does this person need to be standing so that they can help you, so that they can remove this barrier, that they can make equity in that room. And it's about us being open to that, and not challenged, isn't it, really? Just saying. And I always think, and we talked about this, I think, a little bit in the language one that we recorded, it's okay to say, I've never done that before, I've never encountered that before, you're the expert in this, can you tell me what it is that I can do to help you? Rather than just that. I think we have a sort of tradition to sort of feel bad about ourselves if we don't know how to change things for everybody. And I think that's a lot of the kind of, when you hear people denigrating, being inclusive as kind of like, wokery gone mad. We used to say political correctness gone mad, didn't we? I think a lot of people who denigrate that do so because they're self-conscious about the fact that they might not know what to do in that situation. And
Yeah.
there is so much value in life in just saying, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to do, or, you know more than me. Can you help me? You
Yeah.
know, and that's never not welcomed. It's the assuming that you do know better and you can take something on board that you've got no experience of. That's the thing that causes the problem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yes.
Are
Oh,
we going to talk finally about the bugbear we have? And you've got such a great example of this. So Lindsay and I do not use the term ladies and gentlemen when we introduce anything. We never ever address a congregation, or in our other lives when we occasionally do weddings, we never address wedding guests in that way. Lindsay, why do we not do that?
well, I think the simplest to say, it's making assumptions, isn't it? It's making
Isn't
assumptions
it?
that we are in a room of people that refer to themselves as ladies or gentlemen. Or you can,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls is what what you can
Oh,
and I
yeah.
just think, do you know what? I will be 100% honest here, that I know that Kirsty, you are a lot more knowledgeable on the language that we should be using in these situations. I'm still learning hugely
Yeah,
with this,
I
and I
am
think
too.
my celebrant journey has really helped me. So I still slip up. It's really difficult, but I think
Mm,
the point is to remember is that there is nothing there is nothing wrong with not saying ladies and gentlemen, just saying welcome everybody or welcome to you all. And by doing that, you're being inclusive. You don't have to fully understand all of the different terms you should be using, or it's a learning
no,
curve, and I understand that. And there are so many people that do struggle with it, but there are also so many people that don't understand or are not very accepting. But all we're saying
yeah,
is, by using ladies and gentlemen, you're making an assumption that the people in that room
mm,
are all
yeah,
referring to themselves as that, and
yeah,
we
yeah.
don't need to do that.
No, and it's not always necessarily a cis or non-binary or trans kind of issue. It's just if somebody asked me to describe myself, I would never use the word lady. I
No,
would never use that
no,
word. I
no.
would say woman, you know,
Yeah,
but for me, but yeah, can
yeah.
you share your example?
Yes, I'm going to share my example. So
Can you? I think it's really telling.
it's a short example, because otherwise I will rant. So it's just a short example. Um,
Please rant, Lindsay.
So I went to an event, and one of the talks that was at this event was on inclusivity.
Mhm.
So somebody was doing a talk, telling and talking to everybody about being inclusive, using inclusive language, and how we can be more inclusive in our work. And I think all I need to say is that they stood up and they began the talk with, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen." And I did think that there was sort of, it was going to be incorporated, and
It was a
they were
setup.
going to refer back to that,
Yeah.
but no,
No.
no, they didn't. And so I'm afraid that the whole talk fell a bit flat for me, because
Of course it did.
I just would hope that the person speaking about inclusivity was able to teach me and give
Yeah.
me some new knowledge. And straight away I just thought, well, you've already excluded some people in this room, because I knew
Yes.
for a fact that some of the people in the room who had specifically come to listen to it
Yes.
would have felt excluded by that language.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's terrifying, isn't it? I think yeah, that's really concerning. There's nothing better than an expert with no expertise. I'll just say that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I noticed myself doing something in a script I wrote this week, which I didn't actually consciously do, but after I'd done it, I thought, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that in future. And it was when a family had chosen a piece of poetry that they wanted to be included, and it's absolutely beautiful. I hadn't heard of it before. It's gorgeous. And the poet, the author, is called Leo Marx. And as I was writing the kind of, now we're going to share the words of the poet Leo Marx, I'd written and their poem entitled what the poem was entitled. And I didn't consciously do it. And then afterwards, as I was reading back over it, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm obviously starting to really train myself out of gendering people that I don't know the gender of, the assumption from somebody's name. So when on my email signature, I have my name, and underneath I have she/they. And I've been asked about it a couple of times. I've actually got a wedding from it, because when I responded, and it was just my email signature, it's not something that I consciously did for that couple. One member of that couple identified as they, and that was really important to them, that I had awareness of that. And the reason that I do that is because of some equality training I did a long time ago, to take away the assumption that somebody knows that if I say at the end of an email, my name is Kirsty, somebody who isn't familiar with the culture that my name comes from wouldn't know whether that was somebody who presented as male or female necessarily. And also because of the fact that I actively would like everybody to be they. I actually would. And that's not to say that I don't think, that I don't have respect for the differences between, people who present as male or female, or, it's not because of that. It's just because I don't think it should matter. I don't think it should be the first thing that we judge somebody on. So I would not have any issue with somebody referring to me as they. So that's why I consciously do that. But I did notice then the other day that I thought, obviously something in me thought, and it's interesting actually, because I met somebody recently who I've been doing some work with, whose name is Leonora. And maybe in my head, I just thought, oh, Leo, maybe it's short for Leonora, and just automatically put they. But I just noticed that I'd done it, and I just thought it was interesting, that
it is interesting.
yeah, and it's nothing to be arsy about. Like, so what? So what? Why does it matter to anybody else what pronoun you want to use? Why is that a thing?
I think, and it's I think it comes from all directions. It's just about just everyone being understanding, being inclusive, and just not using language that might cause offense to people. And I know there are so many arguments and debates and conversations over that, but I think just for us in our workplace, and if we can sort of strive to be as inclusive as possible, and to perhaps challenge those people that aren't as able to accept that, then I think that's sort of
and admit our mistakes and our limitations. There may be people listen to this now who aren't comfortable with the fact that that's the way I interpret they in terms of me, because it's different to the way that they do. But that's okay, because there's room for that. And just to add to that as well, I know I'm going off on one on this, but I think it's really important to note that I did the wedding of that couple where one of the partners I used the pronoun they, and at one point during that ceremony I misgendered that person, and it was a slip of the tongue, as I was in the moment of, well, you know what it's like. There's small children, there's weddings, there's pressure, there's stuff, there's a photographer right now, there's a lot going on. And at one point I, through a slip of the tongue, misgendered that person, and I actively stopped, paused for a second, and looked at the person and said, I'm sorry.
Oh,
And
well
then
done you.
I read that bit again, because I thought, skirting over it doesn't help, does it?
No.
And apologizing for something that in that moment you have no control over, because we all have slips of the tongue sometimes, don't we? And so just to say that, it's the most important thing probably is for us all to be honest about the times that we're not inclusive, and actually to apologize for that, because we are offending people when we do that. We're unintentionally offending them, but we are.
Definitely. So I think it all comes down to communication. I think everything we've spoken about, isn't it? It's communication on our part, And
Yeah.
communication on everyone's part, just to know that if you're working with a celebrant, please talk to us, let us know,
Yes.
whatever your needs are, whatever we can do
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make that service more inclusive for you. That's what we're there for. And
Yeah.
obviously, as we spoke about, sort of a big thing for me is those people that are on the autistic spectrum. And I think
Yeah.
that just being aware that everyone's different, asking the questions, what are their triggers and what can you do to make the service more accessible for them, and
Yeah.
remembering that if that the person you're actually talking to is autistic, they won't be able to give you eye contact. That's almost a given.
Mm.
And so just understand that they will still be listening to everything that you say, and
Yeah.
it's likely that they will have questions after you've left, and
Mm.
then you can deal with them on email or anything. So I think that they were a
Yeah.
couple of things I should have mentioned earlier that I will throw in there at the end, because it's close to my heart. So I want all funerals to be inclusive and all people to feel welcome and able to attend them and to get what they need from them.
You do want that, and I'm sure that you do it. And yeah, and if we don't know, we can't do, can we?
No,
So it's
no.
having that conversation. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to throw in a reference to the wonderful Dr. Maya Angelou, who very much gives us the message that, we do our best until we know better. And when we know better, we do better.
Yeah,
Well,
love it.
perhaps that's a nice note to finish on for
That is
today.
a nice note to
You
finish
throw
on.
a bit of Maya Angelou in there, why not?
Yeah,
Yeah, so hopefully you have enjoyed this episode of our podcast, Not If But When. If you have, tell the world for us, will you? Because we're here, we're talking about all these things. We're really interested in your opinions. You can find either of us, both of us, on socials. If you have anything that you would like for us to discuss or anything that you would like to add, we're always looking to do better, aren't we? So we will be back with you next week. We should be organised enough to tell you what we'll be talking about, but neither of us are. So it'll be a lovely surprise for us all. We'll plan it in advance. We should not this far in advance. So until you hear us again, thank you for listening to us, and don't forget to embrace life whilst you are embracing the inevitable. Bye.
absolutely. Bye.